The idea that a high IQ is purely a blessing. For generations, we've all been sold this narrative that exceptional intelligence is the ultimate skeleton key, right? The one thing that opens every door and makes life inherently easier. But what if that's fundamentally wrong? Today, we are unpacking the hidden physiological and psychological cost you might actually be paying for that mental speed. And we're basing this all on the fascinating yet rarely discussed science of high cognition.
Seriously, I want you to ask yourself a somewhat uncomfortable question right now. What if the very architecture that makes you think faster, deeper, and across way more dimensions is also the exact thing leaving you chronically exhausted and misunderstood? We're going to explore how having an unusually capable brain doesn't necessarily make you free. In fact, it might just make you the most articulate prisoner in the building, completely trapped behind bars constructed from your own sophisticated sentences.
All right, Section 1, the physical cost of IQ. Let's actually look at the biology of intelligence. So back in 2018, Ruth Karpensky published this groundbreaking study out of Pitzer College, and it proved that the friction of high intelligence isn't just social at all, it's deeply biological. She compared American Mensa members directly to the national average, and the results were absolutely staggering. The high IQ population had dramatically higher rates of mood disorders, anxiety, ADHD, and even autoimmune diseases. Why? Well, your operating system simply runs hotter. It's kind of like having a Ferrari engine stuck in everyday stop-and-go traffic. Eventually, that engine is going to overheat. You aren't just imagining the exhaustion. Your body's literally bearing the physical tax of an overpowered engine. Clinical psychologist Kazimir Dabrowski actually gave us a clinical name for this: overexcitabilities. This perfectly explains that low-grade dread and vivid sensory exhaustion you feel in a crowded room where everyone else seems perfectly fine. It's not a malfunction, it is just the cost of advanced development. But to manage this extraordinary intensity, you have to implement daily professional grounding exercises. I mean, actively scheduling low-stimulus recovery windows. Dimming the lights, putting on noise-canceling headphones, and practicing somatic regulation to manually cool down your nervous system before that sensory overload becomes chronic. Moving on to Section 2, the intelligent prisoner. Let's look at IQ and rationality. There is this super dangerous cultural assumption that a high IQ automatically makes you more rational. But modern research shows us that intelligence and rationality are not the same thing at all. Based on cognitive scientist Keith Stanovich's concept of dysrationalia, your high IQ actually makes you dangerously skilled at defending whatever it is you already want to believe. Think about it. You don't use your massive processing power to find the truth. No, you use it as a justification engine, reasoning your way right back to your existing preferences and just dressing them up in a much, much better vocabulary. And this step-by-step process, it is exactly how brilliant minds rationalize themselves right into disaster. Just look at the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. His victims weren't gullible. We're talking about physicists, Nobel laureates, and hedge fund quants. They fell for it because their massive intelligence allowed them to construct elegant, super sophisticated reasons to dismiss the glaring warning signs that an average investor would have run away from. You feel something is wrong, your brain builds an airtight legal defense for why that feeling is incorrect, and the truth simply dies in chambers. You've probably even done this yourself, right? Arguing your way out of a truth your body had already accepted. Okay, Section 3, the burden of memory. Welcome to the resentment archive. Most people are biologically gifted with forgetting. Their nervous systems file small humiliations into a little drawer that quietly self-destructs. But the high IQ mind, it does not have that luxury. Neuroscientist Endel Tulving calls this episodic memory. You don't just remember an event, you preserve it with its full sensory context, literally like a fossil in amber. You'll replay a conversation from 8 years ago and feel the exact same heat in your chest, remembering the precise half-second pause that revealed someone's contempt. And this is exactly why smart adults can sometimes seem, heavy or cold. Because they cannot afford cheap forgiveness, their resentment ends up accumulating in geological layers over time. This is precisely why high IQ adults are disproportionately drawn to frameworks like Stoicism or Buddhism. It's like intellectual triage. But to survive this, you can't just read about detachment. You have to actively practice mindfulness to break the loop. When that archive opens up in your mind, you must use mindful observation to recognize that the memory is just a historical artifact, not a present threat, consciously forcing your brain to let go of that emotional weight. Next up, Section 4, the cursed middle band. We're mapping IQ against life satisfaction here. So if you're sitting at the average baseline around 100, life satisfaction is usually pretty high, simply because the world's conversations, entertainment, and social rituals are perfectly calibrated to your speed. Now, if you are way up in the stratosphere, above 175, you often disappear into a kind of monastic specialization, much like the famous prodigy William James Sidis. You're completely removed from normal society, sure, but your loneliness has the discipline of pure abstraction. But then, there is the cursed middle, roughly 130 to 155. If you are in this band, you are high enough to see the structure of the world clearly, but not high enough to escape it. You can map the prison perfectly, but you cannot pick the lock.
You can probably feel this one in your chest right now, can't you? It's the pure, unadulterated exhaustion of sitting in a meeting just watching inefficiencies happen in real time. You are painfully awake in a sleeping world, and awareness without exit truly is its own form of torture. To combat the specific cognitive burnout, you really need strict daily routines, segmenting your day to allow for high-level intellectual pursuit on your own terms, while consciously practicing radical acceptance during those mundane social obligations. You have to actively choose when to try to pick the lock and when to simply rest.
Moving to Section 5, Loneliness and Predictive Grief. Let's talk about the witness problem. Psychoanalyst Peter Fonagy formalized this idea of mentalization, highlighting what we call the witness problem. To be heard by average folks, you have to painfully compress your 17-dimensional thoughts into a flat 2D avatar. The world doesn't actually meet the real you, but to rebuild healthy social connections, you have to bridge this gap. This means learning to communicate your complex internal state without completely overwhelming others, basically offering the executive summary of your feelings to loved ones, explicitly stating your needs without demanding they process the thousands of variables you just analyzed in your head. Because your pattern recognition runs so fast forward into the future, you experience what we call predictive grief. While average minds usually underestimate their resilience, you model trajectories so accurately that predicted suffering literally becomes present suffering. You notice a tiny fracture today, and you mentally attend the relationship's funeral weeks later. By the time the actual loss arrives months down the road, you've got nothing but exhaustion left, which outside observers totally misread as coldness. The only real defense here is grounding yourself strictly in present data, absolutely refusing to pay for tomorrow's losses on today's installment plan. Finally, Section 6, Escaping Your Mind. Let's look at the Terman verdict. To find our way out of this trap, we really have to look at Louis Terman's famous 1921 study of gifted children. He gathered 1,500 highly gifted kids, calling them termites, fully expecting them to become revolutionary minds. Well, decades later, the results totally destroyed his premise. Not a single termite won a Nobel Prize. Yet, and here's the kicker, 2 boys he explicitly rejected for not scoring high enough on his test went on to win Nobel Prizes and fundamentally changed the world. Terman's test only measured how well you surrendered to the existing mental order. It completely missed the frame-shattering brilliance required for truly original thought. If your massive intelligence is essentially just a justification engine, the only philosophical escape hatch is intellectual humility. But you have to practice this actively. This means consciously seeking out data that completely disproves your smartest theories. You must recognize that your speed and perception are not always accurate. The brilliant mind you're so incredibly proud of is perfectly capable of lying to you, with an articulacy that nobody else could possibly match. Force yourself to ask this daily. How might I be completely wrong about this? So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final, truly provocative question. The smartest thing you can do right now is begin to suspect your own mental frameworks. Are you actually using your massive cognitive processing power to discover the truth? Or are you just using it to build better walls for your own cell? Because until you start actively questioning your own internal logic, you are not truly using your mind, you are simply being used by it. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I really hope this gives you a brand new lens to view your own brilliant, complicated mind.